Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host, and it is my pleasure to have here today with me Joseph Federico, who is an author, and I actually have his books over here. So, hi Joseph.
Hi Eric. It's an absolute pleasure being here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise. Thank you for
Truly.
being here. Yes. So I wanted to start by asking first, which book came, before, and what was the impetus for the book?
Okay, so actually the one on the right, the Galloway Township came first.
This one, okay.
About in 2011, so 3 years before that, we had actually been approached by my partner's sister who lives in Galloway Township.
Okay.
And she lives in one of the old homes that was there from the late 1800s. And she didn't have anything besides a lease, for her home. And we had wanted to learn more about the house itself. The old chimney, the flooring, not really being into history at that point. She had contacted Arcadia first, but they wanted her to write the book. She had a child at that point. She is a scientist. She works full time. She said, "Boys, let's start the project." So that
Just pretty much gave it to you.
She's like, "Okay, well, you're on."
Handed it over
Absolutely.
to you. Yeah.
So, long story short, about 2.5 to 4-ish years, we spent doing a research project.
Just researching for 2.5 to 4 years.
Correct.
Wow.
On all the old families that were still in the town, the surrounding township, so forth and so on.
Yeah, tell people what the book is about.
Sure. It's Galloway Township. It's about a half hour from Atlantic City inland in the Pinelands. And the history goes back to the mid to late 18th century. Okay. And George Washington, of course, he was everywhere during that time, pre-Rev War, but he was there a few times, and so was Ben Franklin. And this was, really a place that could have been the first Atlantic City. And then the railroad happened, the Industrial Revolution, and then out came Atlantic City years later. So this is just a 180 or so page book about the entire history of Galloway Township.
Yeah, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean,
I knew nothing about it. Yes,
absolutely. Being down there just to visit family with my partner and his family and the beach. Once in a while AC, but not really, like the beach mainly, and for the eateries down there. But it was just fascinating meeting the families who had been relatives of those who had been there the whole time.
Right? Yeah.
So that was really what drew us to the project, is learning about the history, not really selling a book and making money. That wasn't our plan whatsoever.
Right.
So again, long story short, we almost didn't get the project. Arcadia Publishing was a little weary that we weren't locals. So we had to get the Historical Society actually on our side, write another letter to them. They signed on. It went back to the board. We got the green light about 6 months to a year or so later. So it was almost a no-go. Yeah. And we just did research on our own, and we it was self-funded. Yeah. And we just kind of went from there, Eric. So.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you were going to get the book or some form of it out anyway after all the research, right?
Exactly. There's,
even in our home, time into something, it's like I have to put it out into the world.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So that was the first one. Okay. The second one came years later in 2012. On the left. Yeah. So that was A Labor of Love. Yes. It's just a story that came out. As an author, I truly believe that you can't have anything holding you back, and it really didn't hold me back. Sure. So it started on the shores of South Carolina in 2012 as my summer project, and then I wrote, that summer for 2 or 3 months. That's fine. I put it away. So that took about actually 5 or 6 years from start to finish to get it.
From when you started writing to publication?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
2 very different books.
2 very different books, yes.
Absolutely.
So tell us about the second book. What is the second book about?
The second book is a fantastical journey through the 18th century New Orleans, namely on Bourbon Street, Mardi Gras. Yeah. I always had this attraction to the history, the culture, the food of New Orleans from a child. and I never went. You know, I was just dreaming of going. You definitely have to go one day.
Yeah,
you know.
no, I definitely have to go.
Definitely not in the summertime. It's way too humid down there.
Okay.
But it is just, I was enveloped in this culture. So I went with my friend in 2014 originally, and I had the book, you know, started. Of course, it started to take place actually in the Carolinas. I had all the, you know, characters lined up, you know, history, research done, and then I went to New Orleans. And one night we're in like an establishment, and the whole thing changed. I got this vision almost of what this book had to be. So these you know, characters actually came to me, and like in a sense, you know, spoke to me.
Right.
And they said, we have to get this book done as well. So it's like a little
that's powerful
of the culture of New Orleans, a little voodoo, a little, you know, craziness happening there. But again, it's, you know, characters that I fell in love with.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating that one is historical, right? You're talking about...
It's factual.
Yeah, it's factual.
Yep,
you're talking about the history of the place. And the other one, even though you're talking about a place that exists in the United States.
Exactly.
It's a fictional book, but, you know, it's a very interesting story.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a very intriguing, different kind of story, Eric. So, and, you know, again, I did have some people that did help me with research from a historical stance that I met down there, you know, tourists and other people, friends that I now call friends, that helped me to put it into perspective of the time period.
Yeah, because I think it's even harder to do like a fictional book when you're actually setting it in a place in history in a specific town or country or what have you,
time.
Right? Or time,
period.
Yeah, or period.
Absolutely.
So because you have fictional characters, but you also have to be cognizant of what the town or place looked like back then, in this case in the 1800s.
Even writing this, you know, project and book and the research, I tried to go back to when I was there, smelling the smells and the food, and, you know, hearing all the music and the jazz wafting out of every corner. You know, it's really like that, by the way.
Oh, okay.
And it's just, I just couldn't help myself, you know, like essentially. So that really was a labor of love, that a story that had to be told as my breakout, you know, first novel.
Right, right, yeah. So where do you find the inspiration? Like, what was the first story or book that you read that inspired you?
My first story that I wrote, I'll kind of answer, I guess, backwards.
Okay.
The first story that I wrote was based off of two things. It sounds a little silly, but it's, you know, it's my soul. So a movie called The Skeleton Key with Kate Hudson in the early 2000s. I
believe I know what it is.
So that
I've never
was kind
seen
of
it.
the premise.
Okay.
It's a, you know, like a haunted house story, you know, like essentially like a B movie, but it's my favorite movie. Okay. And before that actually was Anne Rice's son, Christopher Rice, whom I'm, you know, close with. You know, his first novel when he published when he was 21 was Identity of Souls. And that was a Southern Gothic story that hit my soul. And I read it, I'm like 4 or 5 times in the past, maybe like 12 to 15 years. So every few years, I try to draw that inspiration from his first book. So that's really what got me going. So with the movie and with the, you know, his book by Christopher Rice, I actually wrote a premise, like a preview backstory that was the grandfather of this book, actually.
Okay.
So it was like a 2-page story, you know, trying to get the Southern dialect down, just kind of to work through the kinks for my own purposes first. It was never published. It was just for me, for my records. And that's how it evolved. So, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
It really is, because I'm really interested in the process, right? Because there's always a process to whatever it is, especially, you know, as a writer, an artist, and what have you. There's always a process to the madness, if you will.
That's exactly. It can be madness at times, Eric. So yes.
But this is the perfect place for us to, you know, take a little break.
Absolutely.
But, you know, I'm gonna come back and talk much more about these books, about your life and your projects. Okay. So for everybody watching, we will be back right after this break. And we are back with I'm here once again with Joseph Federico, so I'm just going to jump in.
Of course.
And so we were talking about the process, right? Yep. We touched a little bit on it. And what is your process like as a writer? Do you have one? Do you have like...
I'm very unique, and I've spoken to authors over the years that I know, friends, or, like Christopher Rice, and other authors that are local, to townships and such. And there's not one process. And I've learned that over the years, that I found my own niche, I guess, to start working on a project. So I always write my manuscript on pen and ink, or with pen and ink. And on paper.
So handwritten. Okay.
Handwritten always. I think it's like a safeguard almost. I don't trust computers, even though having worked in tech for large companies, I don't trust tech as far as when it comes to my work.
Right.
So I always write. I always outline the characters and settings first, with the soundtrack actually. So on iTunes or Spotify, I create a specific scene in my head or a storyline.
So you create like a mood with the music.
I have to, have to really be into the mood to start writing. If not, then I start something and I leave it for months to years, and I would rather not do that, just going forward with my projects. So I write out the characters. I try to have them, again, this sounds a little nuts, I swear it's not, have them, talk to me. And what their backstory is. Are they struggling? What do they have to evolve into to become a main character, in my book? So from that, again, it takes anywhere from 1 to 5 years, like, this book on the left. Yeah. And I then start typing, and I go through it like a very elongated, tough, tortured process. And I have the same soundtrack, and I add songs to it, or I delete some songs to put me in different moods, with different scenes. This one in particular was classical, namely songs from Coven on TV. Some 18th century music, some royal music, some rap, all kinds of different moods that had to build up to this storyline. Getting published. So then I actually read through the manuscript once I type or as I'm typing, as the characters to make sure that it flows properly. And then I go from there. So it's a very, again, elongated, tortured process, but it's worth it in the end.
It sounds very intense, yes.
Thank you so much. For us, because like everybody, say, oh, you're a writer, but there's not one process.
No, I know there isn't one.
Not one straight and narrow path.
Yeah, of course. I know there isn't one. And I know that different writers, deal with it differently.
Of course. Some, have a recorder, some take notes. I do all of the above, but it starts on like a marble notebook, actually. So.
I remember one time I took a creative writing class back in college, and one of the books assigned to us wasn't actually like a novel or anything. It was a book by Stephen King. I think it's called Alone in a Room.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's just like techniques about how to actually get your story out.
He has a few of those actually.
Into the like
when I was actually
page.
Raised, reading Stephen King, reading R.L. Stein.
It just sounded fascinating because
Mary Shelley. I mean, these are masterminds.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree that, especially Stephen King still being as big as he is,
and very prolific too. Yeah.
Exactly.
He writes a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. He just is one of the top people I would highly recommend learning from. Not just writing, but also for TV and for scripts as well. He has that process locked down. Right. Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I remember that book from my college writing class. But I'm not a writer.
No, yeah. I understand.
If anything, the only thing that I do is really a monthly column, which is like 500 words. So.
And I have read those, Eric. So you write quite well. So you are creative type
but
as well.
It's not on the level of a novel or anything. But for a column it works.
Of course.
But even being concise and doing 500 words, 550 I have, it's very challenging because sometimes I'm like, I want to extend myself, but then I only have 550 words to write, so the space is limited. So I have to cut things out,
and edit and
edit and outline
read it, and then outline
exactly. And it's I can only imagine what it takes to write a book. Yeah, really.
Of course.
So, okay, is there any other thing that inspires you on a day-to-day basis as an artist, as a writer? Because I consider artists, like writers as well, because they are.
Yeah, absolutely. What inspires me? Nature, as of late. When I started running, I get inspired by nature, by flowers. Again, seasons definitely inspire me a lot. Moods, this past winter was definitely one of those times where I had some darker, storylines brewing inside of me, and just like exercise, family, and love, really just, and also community also inspires me.
Yeah.
In many different ways.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, nature can be very inspiring.
And I can't explain each one to you, but they are definitely all, they speak to me in some way. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. No, you said nation, and it just brought me back to some memories of my childhood and like going to the beach or something.
The smells,
I love
your
it.
neighbors at the beach.
Exactly. Just the smell of the beach, like the scent of, like beach. The salt and
the heat against the hot sun, the hot sand, the spray of suntan lotion,
yes,
the iced tea. I mean, like that's really what had started this project. In particular, was a drink actually called Voudou Juice, and I'm thinking that's a great title. Yeah. Let's work with it.
Yes.
So speaking of beach. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, because I'm from, from a city. I'm from Rio, so yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Plenty of beaches there, so that was like my childhood growing up.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And going there, and for me specifically, it's that time right before the sun goes out. So like maybe an hour before, when you still have sunlight, and then the sun sets. But that final hour for me, it's like a perfect time to go to the beach.
Exactly.
It is. Because things are quieting down, it's not night yet, but it's the sun, it's not so hot. So it's like at the very end of the afternoon, like around 5:30, 6. So that was.
I agree 100%. That's like a private time almost.
Yeah.
A really special time at the beach.
Yeah,
so,
So anyway, I took a tangent on the beach, but
it's fine.
I just went back to Rio for a moment. But anyway, what is the last thing that you read that it, like touched, moved, or inspired you?
I would say The Secret Six, about George Washington and his spies.
Oh, wow.
Again, pulling that inspiration for future projects. But I'm a huge Washington fan. Being like a local historian as well, I pull that from, these books as well. So that really had an impact on me. Yeah. Namely because of what our country went through to have their freedom, have our freedom. Yeah. And for future generations, so. So if that works, then yes, that's the last thing I read, and that's definitely what had pulled.
Sure, no, of course it works. Yeah, it's the thing that inspires you. Yeah. So do you read like a lot of historical work, or do you read a lot of fiction as well? Which one? Is there one that you prefer? Like
I prefer historic fiction. Okay. And that's what I tend to write, or try to write as an author. But I read a lot online, like a lot of historical articles from new authors, from old authors. I try to watch even like a lot of the documentaries to just learn things that are in the book sometimes, or on YouTube or blogs. So I prefer the historical fiction. Yeah. But also I really can't say that I prefer, I don't prefer the other genres either, because as a writer I have to pull that inspiration from all the above. Sure. Essentially, so.
Yeah, like even if you think about something like science fiction, there is something that has to ground that story.
And from a historical, time stamp or time period where that genre was most popular, like 1960s and 70s. Right. So that's really what pulls it as well for me.
Great. Yeah. So, this is so good. Okay, so we're gonna take a break now, cool. But we will be back with Joseph Federico after this break. And welcome back to I Am. I'm here once again with Joseph Federico. So, Joseph, yes, we were talking about just touching upon, being an author, the struggles, the long process, drained out process that it is. Absolutely. So, can you talk a little bit about, for young authors, for people who are, who want to get into the field, have their first book published, maybe? Of course. Or short stories. How was that process for you? How are you, doing your part to help those people as well?
I would say, especially with coaching and learning to coach young authors and, college students especially, without clips, you have to start. And most people I speak to that are younger, even older first-timers, are afraid to just start. Oh, I'm not published, I don't have clips. You have to just start. Put the ink to the page. Look at platforms like Craigslist or other even contests, and just put your work out there. Not for the money, not for the fame. Get your voice heard.
Just to get the ball rolling.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And I did that. Being a self-taught author, getting my first newspaper published in the early 90s. Again, via myself, about like a story about Santa Claus and the Swamp Thing. I like to speak about that, where I saw like a news story and I just wanted to write as like an 8-9-year-old.
Yeah.
So you just have to start. Make sure that your voice is heard, and it's never wrong. And then I would most certainly say you have to, again, get clips, either paid or unpaid, clips and bylines, and build your portfolio.
Right.
It's extremely important, because once you do go to a small or medium or large publisher, they'll ask what you had done in the past.
Of course.
And that's where you really have to just start.
So even if it's just like a local newspaper, it's worth
intern there
to do it.
Or make contacts and just learn the ropes, and it will either be for you or it won't be for you at all, and you'll know pretty quickly.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I always think of like when we hear so and so is like released a book that became a bestseller, right?
Yeah.
And you think that those people like became overnight successes.
Absolutely.
And they didn't do anything like before that
like
book
wrote
was
a check
published.
And they just got
exactly.
Published. That's not.
No. Yeah.
It's not the movies.
Exactly.
Eric, so.
No, I know it's not the movies.
No.
It's like the overnight success that took 15 years to happen.
Exactly.
Exactly. For everybody else, it looks like it was overnight, but it was a long journey.
And they just started.
Yeah.
So that's my key phrase. As for me, working in the industry, namely now more of social media with my small firm.
Yeah.
But I was self-taught.
Yeah.
I got paid $3 to $5 per article for like 1,000 words, like years ago, and like it wasn't much, but you must build those clips.
Right.
And you just have to keep on trucking, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So talk about the publishing company that you have now.
Sure. So shortly after we published the book on the right, Galloway Township, I decided to break off into my own small publishing company, Anchors to Desk Publishing LLC.
I love the name.
Thank you. Again, it just kind of felt right, and I got the spark, and that anchor, is really in there to anchor my writing and my career and my soul for other authors and share that process. So I do the editorial work, and I do the writing. I coach as well for authors, and that broke into, as of almost a year and a half ago, Anchors to Desk Media. And we help authors and creatives as well.
Okay.
Jumpstart their careers, and just start to get their careers going and evolve. So.
Wow. And what are the differences that you see from, like, even when you started writing the first book, Galloway Township, to now, in terms of the process? Like, is it faster now? Is it easier? Has it become easier with like the advent of social media? Is it harder because then there's more people talking? How do you see it?
From a personal stance, first, I guess it's less scary.
Okay.
Writing a book like Galloway Township was scary. No other books published, prior to turning 30.
Right.
But it is easier, and you made a good point, Eric, is that with social media, you get a lot more encouragement today as opposed to 12 or 13 years ago.
Right.
So.
And I believe also there's a niche, right? Because
there's an absolute niche.
Yeah, and like people can actually find you.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Exactly, but also it's a blessing, and it's also a curse.
Right.
Because
I can see it. Yeah.
you have to kind of put up a front at times to promote your work.
Right.
get people to work with, so forth and so on, but always have to ground yourself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
How do you do that for yourself?
How do I do that?
Yeah.
I take lots of breaks. I, write something and I, tease it possibly on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. LinkedIn is more business, but at times where appropriate. And I take breaks from social where I can, and I just have time to myself, for myself to write. Mm-hmm. No social, no playlists.
Yeah.
I just brainstorm.
Okay.
And I try to kind of escape that for not days, like minutes to hours at times, where it's just my time to focus and write.
Do you do that?
And or coach. So,
right. Do you do the writing daily? Do you do it how does it work for you?
Weekly. Namely at nights and weekends after 9 or 10 p.m. is my time for me.
Oh, so you work well at night.
I'm a night owl.
Okay, my brain is fried at night.
I push myself because daytime is for business.
Right.
Making business and doing business and coaching and writing for other things. And at nighttime from about 9 to maybe midnight or even sometimes on weekends 1, 2 a.m. is just for me with my music at times, my thoughts, and I try to get that next project started. Mm-hmm. So.
Talking about next project, are you working on something right now?
I'm working on a few different projects, but I am working on another historical fiction piece, novel, that takes place in New Jersey during the Revolution, so the late 18th century.
Wow.
So I'm just starting to research that with my team. My assistant has been great, really pushing me. They're like, Joe, you have to get going.
Yeah.
It's time. Your next thing is out.
Sure.
And I'm actually revisiting Voudou Juice. A second printing's coming probably this the end of summer or early fall. Yeah. And I'm working on actually an Origins book. Yeah. That's a sequel to this project on the left. So.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that should be out again. Hopefully, maybe 2020. It takes place in the 20s in New Orleans. One of the characters, Cody Shrine III, has another adventure to take with me. So
it's like a spin-off.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like in the same place, but different time period.
Different time period.
Yep.
That's fascinating. I mean, you're definitely
trying, Eric. I am trying. Yeah.
Well, you're doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I am.
So, before we go,
sure.
I always ask people, is there anything? And I guess the answers are so easy because they're right over here.
Oh my gosh.
But it's like, is there any piece of work, book, movie, music that you would like people to reach out and, just read or watch or experience for themselves?
I'd say let's plug the book on the right.
Yeah.
Galloway Township is certainly available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and ArcadiaPublishing.com.
Nice, so they can just go there.
It's a great
and buy
beach read, so that's why I'm saying, for now.
Yeah.
And my website, Joseph.
Summer.
Exactly. JosephAFederico.com is my latest website, my newest website, where I'll be sharing thoughts and tips on writing, marketing, coaching, and so forth and so on.
Nice.
And for those of you who are struggling also to write, maybe the book by Christopher Rice, his first book when he was 21, got published, A Density of Souls, is a deep read, a soulful one, but definitely take a look at that as well.
Awesome.
To jumpstart your voice.
Yes, yes. That's very good.
Thank you.
So before we go, last question. The name of the show is I Am, right?
Of course.
So if you had to complete the sentence like I am, what would you say?
I am trying to be a leader in the world of publishing and for the community, and a beacon of light and hope for those who are struggling to get their voice heard. So I think that's fitting for the show. Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here,
thank you
Joseph.
for having me, truly, Eric. It was a pleasure.
Yes, and likewise, it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
And, I look forward to your next projects.
Yes.
And for people, like we were talking about, just go out and get either Galloway Township or Voudou Juice, or both.
Get both. Why not? Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, Eric.
So for everybody watching, we will be back next week with a new episode. And thank you. I'll see you then.